My son's wife looked me dead in the eyes and called me a disgrace. And I just smiled. I didn't smile out of politeness. I smiled because I knew something she didn't. I knew the weight of every tear I'd swallowed, every sleepless night, every hour I worked overtime to raise a boy who would one day look me in the eyes and say nothing when his wife humiliated me. But let me take you back. My name is Sophia. I'm 76 years old now, and I've seen my share of storms, both the ones that rattle your roof and the ones that tear apart your heart. I've lived long enough to bury my husband, raise a son alone, build a modest but proud life, and still somehow be made to feel like a burden by the very people I gave everything to. I never expected to be loved, like a queen in my old age. But I never expected to be disrespected, either. It happened last Sunday. Claire, the woman my son Nathan married nearly a decade ago, called me earlier in the week and invited me for dinner. Just a casual family dinner, she said. Nothing fancy. I paused before answering. Claire and I had never really seen eye to eye. There was always a thin layer of civility between us, polite smiles at holidays, stiff hugs on birthdays, but beneath it all, something colder lived. Claire had a way of speaking that made even compliments sound like critiques. And over the years, her kindness toward me had withered into a routine formality, something she performed only when Nathan was watching. Still, I said yes, because Nathan was my son, because I loved him, because despite everything, I always showed up when asked. I dressed up that evening, nothing extravagant, just a soft burgundy dress with little embroidered flowers near the hem, the one I wore to Lily's 5th grade recital. I brushed my hair, sprayed on my favorite lavender perfume, and packed a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. Nathan used to love this wine when he was younger, when we'd sit on the porch after a long day and talk about life, the future, his dreams, before everything became ... strained. The moment I stepped into their house, I felt it. That HEAVINESS. Claire greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're early, she said, glancing at the clock. It's 10 minutes to 6. I replied gently. Dinner was at 6, wasn't it? She murmured, turning her back to me and walking toward the kitchen. You can wait in the living room. I looked around. The house was spotless, every cushion perfectly fluffed, every magazine stacked neatly on the coffee table. Not a single family photo in sight. Just abstract art and decorative objects that looked like they belonged more in a showroom than a home. Nathan came down the stairs moments later, adjusting the collar of his shirt. He looked tired. There were faint lines under his eyes, and his shoulders slouched ever so slightly. But when he saw me, he smiled. Hey, Mum. I reached up and touched his face softly. You're not sleeping enough. He chuckled and kissed my cheek. You always say that, because it's always true, I wanted to say, but I just smiled. Lily bounded down the stairs behind him, my beautiful granddaughter. 10 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a heart too big for this world. She ran to me and hugged me so tightly, I nearly lost my breath. Grandma, you came. Of course I did, my little sunflower, I whispered, burying my face in her hair. She still smelled like strawberries and childhood. Claire walked in behind them, apron on, holding a tray of roasted vegetables. Let's eat while it's hot, she said. I didn't cook for hours just for it to get cold. Dinner was uncomfortable. Nathan tried to keep the conversation light. He asked about my garden, my knitting club, the new cafe that opened near my apartment. Lily told me about a book she was reading for school, but Claire remained mostly silent, except for the occasional tight-lipped comment. Then, halfway through dinner, Claire set down her fork, took a sip of her wine, and looked at me across the table. Her tone was calm, her voice steady, but her words cut sharper than a knife. "You know, Sophia, you're a disgrace to this family." Silence. I blinked. I thought maybe I'd misheard her. "What did you say?" I asked, more from confusion than anything else. She didn't flinch. Her expression didn't change. I said, "You're a disgrace. You meddle in our lives. You give Lily gifts we didn't approve. You act like this is still your household. It's not." Nathan stared down at his plate. He didn't say a word. Not even a glance in my direction. My fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the realization that the son I raised was now too afraid or too indifferent to defend me. I looked at Claire for a long moment. I thought about all the years I had been polite, all the times I had bitten my tongue, all the dinners I'd cooked, the gifts I'd bought, the babysitting I'd offered, the tears I'd swallowed in silence. And then, I smiled. I smiled because that was the only power I had left in that moment. I smiled because I would not give her the satisfaction of breaking me. "Thank you for dinner," I said, placing my napkin gently beside my plate. I stood up slowly, kissed Lily on the head, and walked to the front door. I didn't cry in the car. Not then. But when I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed and let it all come out, the betrayal, the disappointment, the grief. Not for Claire, but for Nathan. Because no matter how cold she was, it was my son's silence that hurt the most. The next morning, I opened a new notebook. The first page was blank. I wrote one sentence. She called me a disgrace. But I know the truth. And one day, so will my granddaughter. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger passes, it burns fast and dies. But grief settles into your bones like winter. And that night, I felt the cold of it in every joint, every breath. I sat at my little kitchen table, a single lamp burning, a blanket around my shoulders. The teacup in front of me had gone cold. I hadn't touched it in over an hour. The silence was louder than any insult Claire could have thrown at me. But what hurt more than her words, what haunted me, was Nathan's silence. His refusal to look up, his hands nervously rolling his napkin instead of saying anything to defend me. I raised that boy. I poured my entire life into making sure he had a future. After his father died, it was just the two of us. I worked double shifts. I skipped meals. I took jobs cleaning houses during the day and cooking for events at night. I still remember the day I came home from the hospital where I had cleaned the surgical wing for 12 straight hours, just to find that Nathan had fallen asleep waiting for me on the couch, still in his school uniform. And now, I was being told I was a disgrace to the family by someone who hadn't known me 10 years. I stayed in the apartment all week. I didn't leave. Not for the grocery store. Not for my walking group. I couldn't even go to church. I was ashamed not because I believed Claire's words, but because I had allowed them to shake something deep in me, something I thought had long hardened. On Thursday, I finally picked up the phone and called Nathan. It rang 3 times. Then he picked up. His voice was quiet. "Hi, Mom." I didn't even greet him with my usual cheer. I just asked, "Did you hear what she said to me at dinner?" He was quiet for a moment. "She's just under a lot of stress." That's what he said. As if stress justifies cruelty. As if being tired excuses stripping someone of their dignity. "Is that why you said nothing?" I asked, more calmly than I felt. "I didn't want to make it worse," he said. "Mom, Claire just feels like you're overstepping. Like you think you know better than us about everything. Parenting, finances, life." I felt my throat close. "I have never interfered," I whispered. I have supported. I've given. I've offered help when asked. I've only ever wanted to be part of your lives, Nathan. I know, he said, but his voice sounded distant, cold, maybe even afraid. I wanted to shout. I wanted to remind him of every night I sat by his bedside when he had asthma attacks, reading stories by flashlight to calm him down. I wanted to scream that I sold my wedding ring to pay for his first year of college, that I never asked for anything in return but love. But I didn't scream, because I knew it wouldn't reach him. Not anymore. That night, I opened the notebook again. I wrote, "My son is not my son anymore. He is her husband first, and I am just the past, something they think they've outgrown." But I wasn't done. I started writing every memory I had of raising him. Not for me, for Lily, because one day she would grow up. She would wonder. She would ask questions, and I wanted her to have answers, real ones. I wrote about how Nathan used to love helping me in the kitchen, standing on a little wooden stool so he could reach the counter. I wrote about his obsession with dinosaurs, how he once cried when I accidentally threw away a paper match volcano he made in 3rd grade. I wrote about the time he got suspended in high school for standing up to a bully who teased a disabled boy. How proud I was. How I baked his favorite cookies that night and told him he had more courage than most grown men I knew. I filled pages every night by Saturday. My hand ached, but my heart felt steadier. That afternoon I checked the mail. I froze. There it was. A neatly sealed envelope from Lily's school. When I opened it, I felt something inside me collapse. It was a formal notice, written coldly, with no kindness. As per the parent's written request, Sophia_is to be removed from the emergency contact list and is no longer authorized to pick up the child from school grounds. No explanation, no call, no courtesy. They didn't even bother to tell me themselves. I sat on my porch, the notice in my lap, my eyes stinging. This wasn't just about dinner anymore. This was ERSURE. Deliberate. Calculated. They were cutting me out, inch by inch, under the guise of boundaries, respect, and parenting rights. But I knew better. Claire didn't just want space. She wanted control. She wanted Lily to grow up without my voice, my presence, my stories. And Nathan, God help me, he was letting it happen. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. I cried like a mother burying something she could never get back. But when I woke up the next morning, I was different. Something inside me had hardened. Not into anger, but into clarity. They could remove me from pickup lists, from birthdays, from holiday tables, but they couldn't remove the truth. They couldn't remove me from Lily's memory, from her heart, unless I let them. And I wouldn't. Not quietly. Not ever. So I got up, got dressed, and went down to the community center. I hadn't been in weeks, but the moment I walked in, I was greeted with warm smiles. "Miss Sophia," one of the girls cried out. "We thought you moved or something." I smiled, genuinely this time. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I've just been distracted." I rolled up my sleeves and started teaching again, how to knead dough the right way, how to keep rice fluffy, how to stretch a family meal from leftovers. The girls asked me questions about business, about clients, about how to price menus. For hours, I felt alive again. Useful. Seen. I was still Sophia, the woman who built something out of nothing. The woman with stories and skills and laughter. I was not some relic gathering dust in the corner of someone else's life. That night, I walked home under a pale orange sunset, feeling like I'd just remembered who I was. And the next day, fate gave me a gift I didn't expect. I was walking past Lily's school when I saw her alone. Sitting on the curb, hugging her knees. My heart raced. Lily? She looked up, startled, then ran to me. Grandma. I dropped to my knees and hugged her tight. What happened, baby? Why are you out here alone? She looked down. Mom was supposed to pick me up, but she said she forgot. I was going to walk. Alone? I asked, stunned. At your age? She shrugged, eyes welling up. I didn't know what else to do. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, You'll never be alone when I'm here. Ever. Then I drove her home, in silence. My hands trembling, not from fear but from something new, a spark, a promise, a path forward. That small moment changed everything. When Lily sat in the passenger seat that afternoon, clutching her backpack and looking out the window with that quiet sadness only a child can carry, something in me came alive again. Something that had been buried under grief and silence. It wasn't anger. It was purpose. That girl, my granddaughter, was the last living thread between the life I had built and the one they were trying to rip me from. I wasn't going to let go of her. Not now. Not ever. After I dropped her home, I waited by the car until Claire answered the door. She barely looked at me. Oh, she said dryly. Thanks. She was sitting alone outside the school. I replied, my voice calm but sharp. She could have been hurt. Claire shrugged. It was a busy day. She's 10, I said. Not 20. She's fine, she snapped. And you didn't need to bring her here. We had it handled. I stared at her. No, I said quietly, you didn't. Claire blinked, taken aback by my tone. Then she smirked. You always think you know better, don't you? And with that, she shut the door. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the sound of the lock clicking. But I didn't cry this time. I drove home with both hands on the wheel. Steady. Focused. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't let the silence swallow me. I was thinking, planning. Because I knew now that I couldn't fight for Claire's respect. I didn't want it anymore. What I wanted was to preserve who I was. Not just for Lily, but for me. The next morning, I went back to the community center. Asked the director if I could start a new program. Free weekly classes for girls and young mothers on how to build something of their own. Not just meals or crafts, but independence, confidence, voice. She agreed without hesitation. We called it The Table, because everyone deserves a seat at one. Word spread quickly. By the end of the month, we had 15 regular attendees. Teenage girls, new moms, women with bruised arms and broken spirits. And I sat at the head of the folding table in that drafty basement room, pouring everything I had into them. And for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Then one Saturday morning, Lily showed up at my apartment. She stood on the porch, grinning wide, holding a school project folder in her arms. Mum said I could come work on this with you, she said. It's for social studies, family history. I opened the door and hugged her like I hadn't seen her in years. Inside, she flipped through the assignment. She had to write about where she came from, who she admired, what her family stood for. She looked up at me and asked, Grandma, can you tell me your story? And just like that, the dam broke. We sat at the kitchen table for hours, I told her about her grandfather, about how we met dancing under fairy lights in a community center, just like the one I now teach in. I told her how he used to hum in his sleep, how he once walked 3 miles in the snow just to bring me lemon pastries when I was pregnant with Nathan. I told her how he died suddenly, how the grief nearly crushed me, but how Nathan was only 10, and I didn't have time to fall apart. I told her about the food cart, About how I made 20 meals a day on a tiny stovetop in a one-bedroom apartment. About how the first hotel manager I met said my mashed potatoes tasted like his grandmother's, and offered me a contract on the spot. She asked questions. She took notes. Her eyes sparkled. "You're amazing, Grandma," she said quietly. "I didn't know any of this." I smiled. "You weren't supposed to yet. But now you do." That evening, after she left, I wrote a letter. Not to Claire. Not to Nathan. To Lily. I sealed it in a cream-colored envelope and tucked it into a box I've been slowly filling photos, recipes, old letters, the business license for my catering company, even the original flyer I made for my first service in 1978. On the top of the box, I wrote in red marker, "To my granddaughter, the truth of where you come from." She'd open it one day, maybe in college. Maybe when she had kids of her own. Maybe when she felt lost. But she'd know. She'd remember. Weeks passed. Stopped calling entirely. Nathan texted occasionally short, polite messages. "Hope you're well. Lily says hi. We're busy, but maybe next month." I didn't beg. I didn't chase. I let the silence speak. Because I was done proving my worth to people who had already made up their minds. But Lily? She kept coming. Every Saturday. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes she helped me teach the girls at the community center. Sometimes she just laid her head in my lap while we watched old movies and ate popcorn. She was growing into a strong, curious, compassionate girl. And I saw myself in her more and more. Not because of genetics. But because of truth. Because of what we shared between the lines. Grit, heart, a stubborn streak that could move mountains. Then came the call. It was late. Almost 10 p.m. Nathan. His voice was shaky. "Mom, I think I made a mistake." I said nothing. "I let things go too far," he continued. "I didn't stand up for you. I see it now. Lily told me what you've been teaching her. She told me about the journal, about your story. I didn't know. I tried to tell you," I said, softly. "I know," he whispered. "And I didn't listen. But I'm listening now. I didn't say I forgive you. Not yet. Some wounds don't heal in a single night. But I said, I'm still here." And that was enough. Epilogue, Sophia's voice. I didn't flinch when Claire insulted me. I didn't beg when Nathan stayed silent. I didn't break when they tried to erase me. Because I knew something they didn't. That I wasn't just a mother, or a grandmother, or an old woman with outdated views. I was a woman who built a life from nothing, who gave everything she had, her time, her love, her strength so others could thrive, who carried generations forward on her shoulders. And in the end, that mattered more than anyone's approval. Lily would remember me not as the disgrace, but as the foundation. As the woman who smiled when the world tried to break her, and simply kept going.